We're going to start our panel discussion about decoding a mobile ID ecosystem dynamics through public-private partnership. And yes, we have private entities up here and also public entities up here. So I'm Teresa Wu. I work for IDEMIA in Smart Credentials. Past year, I've been working on overseeing several mobile driver license deployment for IDEMIA in North America. So I'm really happy to serve as a moderator / like peanut gallery commentators for this panel discussion. So we have today, instead of 4 panelists, we have 3 panelists joining me. So I'm going to start with Lori. Introduce yourself, what you do, and what ANVA does in the ecosystem.
Thank you so much, Teresa. Good afternoon, everyone. I know we're right before lunch, so if your stomach growls, that's okay. We can probably do it in unison and create some kind of poetry just going with what was done yesterday. But my name is Lori Daigle, and I am a program specialist with ANVA, which stands for the American Association of Motor Vehicle Administrators. We are a nonprofit, 91 years strong in the nonprofit world, and our vision is secure, and here I'm going to go. I'm going to mess it up. It's safe drivers, safe vehicles, secure identity, and saving lives. And the identity program within ANVA takes that to heart. I am 6 months into ANVA. I started with ANVA in November. And I have a colleague over here, Ryan Williams. He started in November with me as ANVA expanded their identity space because the identity realm is so important. That's why we're here. Before I started with ANVA, just a little bit of kind of history of me so that you'll understand where I'm coming from in the MDL space, in the mobile driver license space. I was the driver license director for the state of Colorado, and I worked in that space for 9.5 years. So I have issuing knowledge, what it takes to issue a driver license, as well as part of Colorado's mobile driver license program. So I'm bringing that expertise to ANVA in the space of being support for our 69 jurisdictions. Jurisdictions in North America are all of our states, and then we're looking at Canada and Guam and the Virgin Islands, and all of that makes up the 69 jurisdictions that ANVA supports in the space of motor vehicle administration. Identity management, we support them in the identity space. How many of you are in a state or a jurisdiction or a province that has a mobile driver license right now? Oh. That's wonderful, myself included. There aren't a lot of relying parties for those right now. So one of ANVA's roles in this space, and one of the reasons that I'm on here, is the relying party. If you think about the ecosystem is the holder, and that's the individual who that credential belongs to. It's the issuing authority, and that's the jurisdiction who actually issued that credential and provisioned it to the holder's phone. Then you have the relying party. There's something missing in there, though, too. There's a trust factor missing in there, and one of what ANVA's done is we've stood up what's called a digital trust service. So what ANVA is doing right now for our jurisdictions is we are taking the keys from our issuing authorities, we are putting them into a digital trust so that the relying parties can download those keys and then understand that the mobile credential that they are looking at is issued by a legitimate issuing authority. It's another form of security because if you think about it, the physical cards, those aren't going anywhere. Those are still here. I said there's 69 jurisdictions. That means there's 69 legislative bodies that are governing what those jurisdictions do. So the role of ANVA is trying to make certain that we're consistent, to make certain that we put out standards, we put out best practices, we put out implementation guidelines. We work on 18013-5, 18013-7. We have mobile driver license implementation guidelines that go out, as well as card design standards. Because if you think about it, that mobile driver license is provisioned from that hard card that was issued to the customer. So our role at AMVA is to ensure that we are consistent, that we're interoperable, that 18013-5, those standards make for an interoperable mobile driver license experience for customers who are crossing state lines, who are crossing borders. So the digital trust service I mentioned, and then I'll hand it off to my other panel members. The digital trust service is something that an ISO-compliant credential needs to be in. Right now we have, we'll say 2.5, because one is working on something that they're going to have done by the end of this month. But we have 2.5 in the digital trust right now of those jurisdictions. Of those jurisdictions, of the 69, 17% or 12 are already utilizing mobile driver license. Now, the thing to know is 25% of those 69 have something in the works that is ISO compliant. Of the additional 38%, either are working with their legislators or are initiating legislation in their states for a mobile driver license. So if you do the math, that's 42 and 38. Mobile driver license will start to take off. Our role at AMVA is to help make certain that that's consistent, that it's secure, that it's interoperable, and we're there to support our jurisdictions in what they do in the mobile driver license space.
Thank you, Lori. That's a great summary of what AMVA does. And actually, we invited AMVA so you can represent all the DMVs that's working in this. So you're representing them. Bill from NIST.
Yeah, hey, my name is Bill Fisher. I'm one of the security engineers at the NIST National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, or the NCCOE as we call it. I've been doing identity work now for close to 10 years at the Center of Excellence, and in January I took over with Ryan Galuzzo as the co-lead for the NIST mobile driver's license effort. So just a quick show of hands. Does anybody here know how the NCCOE operates and sort of what we do? Okay, a few people. So yeah, we stood up a mobile driver's license project recently for a lot of the reasons that you just heard from Lori, and for a lot of the reasons you've heard in a lot of the other talks at this event, right? Identity standards really takes a community. And there's a lot of standards that are in this, in the MDL space that we're trying to bring together. And there's a lot of relying parties, as Lori said, that we're trying to bring together. So when Teresa asked me to be a part of this panel, and it was really a public-private partnership. If anybody knows NIST, like that's right in our bailiwick. So what we're doing is we are in the NCCOE reaching out to all the different stakeholders that exist in the ecosystem, all the different standards providers, the regulators, the government bodies, bringing them together to build out a reference implementation of what these MDLs can really look like. As Lori said, we have states that are sort of in different phases of deploying them. We have technology providers that are sort of in different phases of maturation with their technology. We have relying parties that are in different phases of thinking about these new types of digital credentials, how they may help you from a security perspective, how they may help you from a privacy and selective disclosure perspective, how they can improve some of the usability for online transactions specifically, and maybe improve some of the in-person ones as well. And so we really act as a facilitator to try to move that ecosystem forward. So if you were at any of the talks yesterday, you listened to the OpenID Foundation or John Bradley talk about the work that's going on there, or you listened to Google and some of the others talk about the work that's going on in W3C. That's a lot of the standards that we're trying to implement in our lab environment to give everybody an understanding of how these things will work together, right? So you have, we're not really tackling issuance with our effort, but you have things like presentation protocols where OpenID for verifiable presentation is going to play a role. You have the web platform API under the W3C, which will influence presentation models. And then you have a myriad of other standards for the data formats, right? So MDocs, right? That's the ISO format that we'll be looking at, but you also have verifiable credentials. Then you have different ways, and one of the other presentation models is the REST API model. So all of these standards are in this space and are all in different stages of evolution. So how do we stitch these things together, and how do we do that in the context of real-world business use cases, right? To figure out how these things integrate both into business processes and then also from a technology perspective, how do they integrate with your IAM stacks and the user provisioning flows, the authentication flows, and potentially fraud and risk flows that you may already have as a relying party.
Thank you, Bill. Rob.
Great. Thanks, Teresa. So I'm Rob White. I'm a senior director at Samsung. I've been working on mobile payments and mobile wallets for a little over 10 years now at Samsung. So more recently, I've jumped into the identity space, really focused on mobile driver's license and getting that into the wallet. And we started there because the mobile driver's license or the driver's license is really the document that's generally accepted, for identification here in the U.S., right? So over time, we expect to add other types of credentials, but really the driver's license is the first one. We also, realized early on that to have a true mobile wallet, a complete wallet to leave all of your cards behind, which has been the promise of wallets for years now, that we need two things. I think one is ubiquitous payment acceptance, where I know that I can pay everywhere that I go, and two is a driver's license that will be accepted, and specifically by government agencies, probably law enforcement being the most important one, and then I can do things like leave my plastic at home, right? So once I can leave payment cards and IDs at home, I pretty much can do away with my plastic and just go all mobile, right? So we've jumped into the space. I used to think that, that the payments ecosystem was large and complicated and difficult, and then I started doing this. So I'm a little newer to this, but it's been an interesting ride.
It was a learning curve, right?
It's definitely a learning curve. So, very quickly you realize the amount of energy and effort, coordination that goes into getting an initiative like this to life, right, off the ground. And, we are appreciative of the community, really all of our partners, especially, partners at AMVA and NIST and IDEMIA and others that have led the way in terms of driving the standards, right, and helping to get us to where we're at now, right? But we know there's a long way to go. So at Samsung, our role really, I think, has three parts. I mean, the first part is just being a contributor to the standards, to having a voice in the standards, helping to develop, do interoperability testing, making sure that things are working properly. Two is really to provide the container. So we are one of the largest device manufacturers on the planet, and our devices are used to store these credentials and manage them. So we need to have devices that have the right levels of security. On our devices, that's our Knox platform and our secure element and so on. And third, our role is to help bring awareness and drive the product in market and drive relying parties, right? Help to get this thing actually in use. So we've been working closely, with the state governments, with the DMVs that are issuing these credentials to get them into the wallet, right? And to be able to provision them, secure them, transmit them for usage, transmit them only with the information required for that particular situation. We've been working closely with TSA to make sure that the credentials in our wallet work at the airports, really the first big use case, right? And the way I see these use cases, kind of like popcorn, right? TSA was the first kernel to pop, and then you kind of sit around a little bit and stare at the pot, and then a couple of more will pop up, and the next thing you know, it's kind of boiling over with popcorn, right? So, we're working on all of these. And, as the device maker, we provide the platform. We provide a platform, services, developer tools. So, really whether it's our own Samsung wallet, which is something that I work on and have worked on for a long time, or whether it's another wallet on the Android device, we want to make sure that the credentials are secure and can be used properly, in accordance with the standards, right? So equally as important is the go-to-market and driving this in market. We've got as a large consumer electronics company, we've got a large set of customers, partners, service users that we can reach out to, and we will as we launch these services and hopefully, sort of drive this in market. I think that's our role.
Thank you, Rob. So since you talk about popcorn and use cases, TSA was supposed to be here. Jason Lim regrets that he couldn't come. He has a last-minute personal conflict. But definitely those that are aware, the TSA is as a federal agency at the first to a heavy, a compelling use case of support piloting with some of the state to have the mobile driver license be accepted at the checkpoint, right? They validate driver license millions a day, and in that support, they also upgraded their checkpoint unit to verify mobile driver license as well. And IDEMIA is super proud to be part of that enablement work. I personally worked on it for 3 years, like 3 years ago. It was a lot of work. But that was before the standard was even established, so we have to keep track of the standard, build the device in the middle of pandemic, and get the unit out in the right time, and TSA did a really good work of making sure to work with the DMEs to know which one is launching, to make sure the units are in the right airport so that they can support those pilots. So it really takes that collaboration and communication to make this use case, to make the pilot happen. So we are talking about use cases. Let's talk about KYC. Sort of like I think one of the things we right away thinking about, how is mobile ID different to the current identity proofing methods? How does that impact the KYC, Bill?
Yeah, so for the project I mentioned earlier that we're doing at the NCCOE, we came up with a few different use cases, but one of the ones that bubbled to the top almost immediately was with financial institutions for their what's called SIP KYC requirements, right? So customer identification program, know your customer requirements. So how do you do that identity proof and identity verification for the individual as they're coming either in person to the branch, or our focus is mostly on online presentment use cases for that account creation piece. And then what are you doing to monitor that individual and to collect information to know that they are still the person using that account as they are returning to that financial institution? I think in the conversations that we've had, there's pretty much a few things, and I take feedback from the audience if you've seen others, but there's pretty much a few things that we've seen for identity verification, right? So you're probably going to have some sort of knowledge-based question that's going to happen. You're probably going to take a picture of your driver's license, your physical polycarbonate card front and back, and submit that. There's probably going to be a social security verification. And I think what we've seen is that those methods, specifically in the context of online transactions, really don't hold up the way we'd like to see them hold up, right? So I think it's been over a decade now that NIST really hasn't recommended knowledge-based questions, right? It's been 20 years or so that we've been talking about these things. I can't remember when Professor Rubin came out with the first study from Johns Hopkins. It was 15 years ago about how it's not that hard to get the information for knowledge-based questions. And then we start to look at some of the document authentication tools that are out there and the ability for people to present deepfakes or pictures of driver's licenses, or just the fact that a driver's license really is designed with physical inspection in mind, right? So holograms, your tactile features, your microprint, right? This is meant to give the physical card to somebody so they can turn it around and feel it and look at it and have confidence that the card is legitimate. Those things just don't provide you the same assurances when you're taking a picture of it and submitting it online and then trying to have software or AI, a lot of people would say, try to do the analysis to determine if that's real. So sort of in that context, we don't really have the highest bar to jump over really for MDLs, right? So if you're familiar with how MDLs work, they're really underpinned by asymmetric cryptography, right? key pairs, just like with FIDO, just like with our PIV and CAC cards, right? If you heard John Bradley and others talk about yesterday, we now certainly have a key management thing we're going to have to deal with. But fundamentally, they're credentials that are a bit more digitally native, right? So these things can be presented on your mobile device, either between your mobile wallet and another mobile app. They can be presented between your mobile wallet and a web browser on your mobile phone, and they can go in cross-device platforms between your phone and your tablet, your laptop, your desktop, and provide you cryptographic assurances, both of the wallet, of the credential that came from the issuer, and also of the attributes that you're collecting from the user. So we see that as a pretty interesting step up, right, in what you can do from a security perspective and identity verification and proofing perspective. And I won't even get into some of the potential privacy elements that are interesting with selective disclosure and or the usability elements that are very interesting from the user's perspective and how they present these things and kind of some of the broken flows that exist currently. So,
I remember when we were doing our prep call, you literally said something that really marks me. How you're saying the MID, it's basically changing the probabilistic approach doing identification to deterministic approach, because now with the keys, right, with the cryptography, we can ascertain that those attributes are as validated, authentic, and from the system of record.
Yeah, so rather than using a document scanning tool, right, which is just a probabilistic mechanism for, hey, I have enough assurance that I think this document is real, we're getting the cryptographic verification, right? So just like, biometrics are probabilistic and cryptographic verification is deterministic, in this case, it's a very analogous where you're trying to make a probabilistic determination, is this a real device in front of me, right? Like, have I had the person wave it in front of the face? Can they turn it front and back? That type of thing. We're moving away from that towards the cryptographic verification, which is much more deterministic in nature.
Yes. Less guessing, I guess that's what
and if
I'm
I
going to
could
say.
add something to that.
Yeah.
That's what the Digital Trust Service is going to do. It is the link between that private key and that public key. And it is I call AMVA kind of like anyone Ghostbuster fans, I am the key master. The DTS is kind of like the key master in this, so that I do know when I am a relying party that this MDL was issued by a legitimate issuing authority. With that hard card, the fakes are so brilliant, and I use that in a really, it makes my stomach turn, but they're brilliant in how real they seem, that you can literally fake out one of those toaster oven machines that read that barcode on that card. What an MDL does and what the Digital Trust Service does is with those keys, it lets that relying party know this is a legitimate document.
Yes. Since you have the mic, Lori, do you want to help us debunk that privacy concern of MDL?
Okay, so privacy in the MDL. And that's why I have my phone up here waiting in my pocket where I feel like I'm about ready to fall off the chair. Yesterday when I left Denver, Colorado to come to Las Vegas, I used my MDL. And I used my MDL to board the plane. And what happened was, tapped it, and then it said, would you like to give this information over? So I had a choice at that time either to provide TSA at Denver International Airport with my information or not. I decided, sure, why not? I'll let them have it. So in reading this, I have a log, and it's my activity log. The issuing authority has no idea I boarded a plane yesterday at TSA. The Digital Trust has no idea that I boarded a plane yesterday at TSA. None of that information goes back to the issuing authority. None of that information is in the DTS. The DTS is a key holder. But what I presented, and it says info presented and not stored. So what I know is this information is not stored at TSA either. I gave them my legal name, my date of birth, my sex, my ID number, my state, my issue date, my expiration date, my real ID status, and my ID photo. I can remove this activity log from my phone. But that's that privacy piece that sometimes people, the issuing authorities are going to track every move that I make on my phone. The wallet provider is going to track every move that I make on my phone. The relying party is going to track every move that I make. My understanding is unless a state has a legislative reason to track what you're purchasing, as in Utah in alcohol and liquor, there's a legislative reason why they do that. Then that gets built into the MDL, but it's a legislative reason to do so. Other than that, I'm the holder. When I go to a bar, if I looked much younger than I do, all they need to know is I'm over 21. They don't need to know my name. They don't need to know where I live. They don't need to know anything more about me than this is Lori Daigle and she is over 21. That's the information on an MDL that your sons and daughters, your aunts, your uncles, people, your nieces, your nephews that you care about, people will no longer have all the information on individuals that they don't need to have. All that bouncer will have is that's the same person and she's over 21. And that, to me, is like a public good for the holders of mobile driver license, is you get to have control over the data that is being sent to that relying party.
Thank you, Laurie. I think it's important to debunk that myth that because it's a mobile driver license issued by a public entity, that somehow the information got sent home or tracked somewhere. All right, so I'm going to skip because we have about 15 minutes left, and I want to save some time for the audience to ask us questions. So the last question I have for each of you is the popcorn question. Where's the next low-hanging fruit or the next use case that you see is going to pop?
So before we answer that one, maybe I'll just go back to one thing Bill had said about, about challenge questions and the data being easy to find. And I find myself being tripped up all the time by that. What was the first car you owned question? Or I can't remember if that's the one my cousins handed down to me or the one that I bought myself. I don't know. Right? So maybe it's not quite as easy to find, but it is. So I think, personally, I think KYC is a massive use case. This is going to be the thing that makes MDLs, come to life and get widely adopted. It just makes perfect sense for the relying parties. There's a lot of, reduction in fraud. There's a lot of reduction in friction. Get people through the sales process faster, and ultimately it saves money as well. I think it will save costs. So I think this is going to be fairly disruptive. I think it will be interesting to have it in the wallets. I think the wallet's the right place for it because when we go online and relying parties start to put verify ID buttons on their websites, they're likely to do what's been done in the payments world where there's a handful of buttons, right? We think in the MDL world at the moment, it's very state specific, but the reality is that online is borderless and even, in stores, cross borders, right? KYC is a big one. The other major one is law enforcement, right? This is what's going to allow us to actually leave our credential eventually at home where I don't have to carry the plastic. And at that point, we'll see, widespread adoption, right? So I think that really working through the law enforcement scenario is what's going to drive, and KYC is what's going to drive usage.
So kind of what I've seen in the MDL space, right? So if you're tracking things, there is 18013-7 for online presentment is still, we're waiting on finalization this summer in ISO. We're waiting on finalization for some of the other standards that exist in this space. And then we also sort of have a little bit of a critical mass challenge, right? So relying parties are saying to themselves, when are enough people going to have MDLs for me to really need to look at this solution and implement them? And so, maybe not the next like biggest use case to pop, right? Because a lot of the use cases we've been talking about have been these sort of public-facing use cases where citizens bring their MDLs. One that I think is rather interesting that a lot of organizations could do now that's a much lighter weight way of getting used to interacting with MDLs would just simply be I-9 requirements for employee verification, right? So the amount of new employees that are coming into an organization pales in comparison to online use cases and even TSA use cases and whatnot. But there's still a requirement for people to bring identity verification there. And it'd be an internal process with less consequence. You're not worried about losing a customer over this, right? The person theoretically wants the job and are not going to turn it down just because they have to bring in their polycarbonate card. Although I guess some organizations might like that type of person. So that would be a really interesting one that we've heard from some organizations where it's like, hey, if I could get a little bit more used to this technology with a lightweight use case. We've seen some other ones too. So for less high assurance credentials that aren't MDLs, things like off-road vehicle permits, for instance, or backcountry wilderness permits, those types of things. I think we're going to start to see some of those use cases pop actually, so that because people are trying to get used to all this technology and they might want to use it in ways that aren't quite that citizens-facing high assurance use case as the ecosystem evolves, as the standards get finalized, and as the technology providers mature their technologies and the flows around them.
Laurie.
And the one that I feel very strongly about, and anytime we go to an AMBA conference or anytime I have the opportunity to speak with the 12 jurisdictions or the 69 jurisdictions that are issuing mobile driver license, consume your own product. If a DMV who's literally issuing a mobile credential would consume that mobile credential. So I'm thinking about, someone moves to a new state, you have to, if you're going to get a real ID, you have to put down your driver license or ID card, some kind of breeder document, whether it be a passport or a birth certificate, and then you have two proofs of address, and there's things that you go through to ensure that Lori Daigle is indeed Lori Daigle. And if we could utilize the mobile driver license for renewals, for things that you're doing online, for new customers coming in as their plastic card, we're so used to taking the plastic. It's so convenient. You throw your plastic down, I look at it, I turn it over, I run it through my detectors to make certain that it feels right, I drop it, it sounds right. We do all of that. A mobile credential, I don't have to do anything except read it and get that green check that says it is good. So for me, having DMVs consume and states consume their own mobile driver license would be a huge use case to drive adoption.
I can say that being IDEMIA working with DMVs and deploying mobile driver license last year definitely is it's a hot topic with our customer, and we have actually 2 jurisdictions looking at doing that, using the mobile driver license as part of the step-up process before you can do address change of your driver license. Because the fraud happen is you get your data on the dark web, and then you go and then basically get your driver license, change the address, and got shipped to somewhere else, right? So there is sort of this new use case that very compelling one, and definitely fighting fraud that's being deployed and considering right now, and actually very light lift in terms of deploying that use case. How about healthcare or rental car as a next use case?
I'll say on the healthcare stuff. The healthcare industry, in the little bit that we've talked with them, so under our project, our third use case, which is 2020, fiscal year 2025 and out. So we've talked with them quite a bit, and they're pretty bullish on MDLs and these types of credentials. We initially thought things like age verification would be really good for controlled substances, or being able to attestate or sign for prescriptions and that type of stuff would be a use case. But there's actually a lot of use cases that exist for identity verification as well. I was talking with someone who was actually here at this conference, and they were saying that they have challenges in their pharmacies in Texas because, like, some Maria Garcia comes in, right? And it's like there's 250 Maria Garcias in Texas, right? Like, how do you, like, the person
Only 250?
Sorry, with that same birth date, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Like, so you can give them a name and a birth date, and there's like 250 for that same birth date. And so the ability to have that unique identifier, right, that's coming from an MDL that doesn't leave it to the person that's sitting behind the computer to choose the Maria Garcia that they think is the best fit out of all of those, would be a pretty interesting use case as well for how it would help the healthcare industry. So I think we hope to work with them a lot more here coming up in the future to see what happens there.
Any healthcare?
Yeah.
No? Bill, you have a healthcare.
Yeah, just one addition to that. I think this is where wallets come in as well. I think in the future, what you'll see is not only check in with your ID, but some combination of documents that come out of your wallet. So, imagine at the doctor's office, you check in with your health insurance card, your ID, and your co-payment. Eventually, all in one tap, right, or ID along with payment. So I think those scenarios are in our future too, maybe a little bit farther out.
Yeah, especially the insurance cards, right? Like, in terms of extra bulk inside of your physical wallet, right? Like, I have carried around 3 insurance cards for, I think, my entire working life, and the amount of times I've actually had to use them outside of going to the doctor's office is probably 0. So that would be a really interesting one.
And you had mentioned about rental cars. It feels like the natural step. TSA already is using mobile driver license. Rental car agencies are associated a lot of times with airports. It's a billions upon billions of dollars of theft with people renting cars who aren't who they say they are when they put that legitimate driver's license down, or they might not even have driving privileges, but they still have a card that looks like they have driving privileges. So with a mobile driver license, it would help with a rental car situation where I know that Ryan Williams is actually renting this car, and Ryan Williams' driving privilege is not suspended. So he is good to go. I know that's a little iffy, Ryan, but he's good to go to rent that car. And those are kind of the pieces of information you could ask for without asking for everything that is on that driver license. Because a mobile driver license can be updated in real time. And that is one of the really benefits, and you were talking about public service. To have something updated in real time. Let's say I had a suspended driver license and I paid that all off, and now it's legitimate again and my driving privileges are back, but I get stopped before I get that card. I have to hope that the law enforcement officer is hooked up to the system of record so that the law enforcement officer can see, but in real time, that mobile driver license would say I was a legitimate driver on the roads. And remember, safe drivers saving lives is one of our visions at AMVA. So this is really important to us to ensure the safety of our citizens on the road.
Thank you, Lori. Sorry, we kind of went longer a little bit. We have maybe time for one question. Oh, all right. I think you were the first one, so.
I'll make it quick. So I really love the deterministic call out. I think it's really great. But in the enrollment process for the OEM wallets that I've seen, there's still a probabilistic kind of taking a photo of your card, doing a selfie, making me turn my head left and right. Is there a kind of flow that you guys are thinking about lifting the assurance level? Sorry, it's a bit dry here.
Yeah.
Good,
maybe I can answer
question.
that one. You want to? So in you want to answer that?
So yes, there is the capture of the card and the pic and the selfie, but actually most of the jurisdiction implemented is that we actually go all the way back to system of record to check that information from the card. So it's not really probabilistic. We actually check the system of record, and we pull the face picture from your system of record and do the actual match, right? So it's a bit, I would say, higher assurance level than just checking the card. And we are checking against the system of record. The system of record, it's developed based on resulted from an in-person engagement, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, there's still a possibility, right, that things can go wrong, but anybody that gets kicked out goes to an extended review process, right, where they're, the state that's issuing that credential will do some additional checks on them, or potentially even have them, come into the DMV, right, in person. So I think it's pretty good in the way that it's currently set up. But to your point, we saw this with mobile payments, right? This is the weakest link part with mobile payments, is the provisioning into a wallet, because if you can call the call center and socially engineer that acceptance, that card is now in your wallet and you can use it at will. So this part is really important. I think that we're going to continue to work with the providers, to make sure that we're staying up to speed, on how to filter out any of the bad actors.
All right, then. There's too many questions. So I will have the lady go second. Yeah, you the one, the gray shirt. So the user own the credentials. In the IDEMIA platform, actually, we don't store any other data. We don't want to create another honeypot. Your driver license credential, it's with the DMV system of record. It stays there. As we digitally provision to your device, it becomes in the user device. IDEMIA is sort of like a pass-through. We retain the data for troubleshooting purposes, for the processing purposes, but we don't hold it. We don't own it. We don't sell it. And basically, the data become on two places. Like the driver license, you have your data with your card, right, in your wallet. It's in your phone. And then also in the system of record in the back end. Mm-hmm. And the merchant do have in the standard, if they want to retain your data, they have to flag and let you know they have intent to retain your data. They have to tell you. That's a privacy preserving part of the MDL, right? So if they're not retaining, they don't tell you. But if they retain, they have to tell you, and you know they're retaining your data for other processing purposes. All right, the one in the back. Yes, you. Yes.
Right now, we're working on the relying party ecosystem part of it. I see David back there, and we're on a Jumpstart committee, and we're working with a lot of other partners trying to build that ecosystem. It depends on your state and what they're doing. I know some states will have like mobile ID accepted here in their window and things of that nature. So as the ecosystem evolves and as more relying parties get on board, you will see that happening. But that is, they keep talking about the chicken or the egg. What comes first? If we have more MDLs, will more relying parties come on board? Or if we have more relying parties, will more MDLs be issued? I think if we look at it in a kind of collective, if I'm in the state of Colorado, the states that are around me, there are 5,400,000 people in the state of Colorado. potential of how many are issued driver license. If all of those are driver license, that's a potential of 5.4 million customers. Now, what about Utah? What about other surrounding states? So when I approach a relying party, you have the potential to utilize a mobile driver license for 12 million consumers who are either in your state or crossing your borders to utilize a product. You don't want to turn them away when they pull this out to utilize, to use, because that's a lost sale. So that's how we're trying to talk to relying parties to get more people on board.
And I'll just say, at least in the state of I'm also in the state of Colorado where we have MDLs, the barrier to getting it is very light. Like, I literally was on a work call and got my MDL provisioned to me while I was on the work call when I got asked to start co-leading this effort. And so if you're in a state that has MDLs, I would say, just see what that process is like, check it out, and get used to what the wallet provider looks like and familiarize yourself with that technology. And then B, I just go around and ask, like, what is everybody's perception for MDLs? So I go to concert venues, I go to bars, right? Like, even here at Identiverse, when I registered, they asked for my ID. I said, we accept my mobile driver's license? They're like, what's that? And I'm like, whoa, you're at the wrong conference, right? But that's one of the ways in which the ecosystem is going to grow, right? Because at the end of the day, that last mile of the person who's accepting it is going to be a big factor in how these things get rolled out and what the user experience, at least for the in-person use cases, right? Which are the ones that are a bit more prevalent right now. So I would say just try it out. In Colorado, we have what's called the My Colorado app, which has sort of a flash pass ID right now. But they're working to integrate MDLs into that. So Lori said there's 5 million people in Colorado. That app has about 20% adoption rate. So there's 1 million people in Colorado using the FlashPass app. And the governor, Polis in Colorado, has made it a mandate that that app gets equal footing with the polycarbonate card, right? So what we're going to see here in Colorado in the next year or so as they transition fully to MDLs is people are just going to have in the app that they're already used to using a credential that they can now get and do more than just a flash pass, right? So it kind of has to come from both ends. We need to work on relying parties for sure, but if you're in this room and you're an identity and you're not curious about an MDL, like, hey, let's go,
All right. Sorry. We're going to get kicked out of the room. We're like way over time. So I think I would say the takeaway is mobile driver license is here as identity professional. We want you to be the champion of driving this adoption, right? Consume it in your organization. Find ways to adopt and consume it. There are verification app out there available on the App Store to help you verify a mobile driver license in person. And then you have also protocol out there to verify in online as well. So you can actually drive and plan that verification in mobile driver license today. You don't have to wait. There's technology to help you verify those mobile driver licenses in the various use cases. And we just challenge you to find how to use it in your respective organization. So thank you for attending our panel. We're going to be around, right, all of us. So happy to talk more. Thank you.